Hello everyone, I hope everyone had a wonderful week. So, this week's Parsha had different things going on. However, to focus on a specific pasuk and the chazal of that specific pasuk, and B'ezras Hashem can come out with an understanding that is perhaps very, very valuable. The pasuk in our Parsha says the following: Al Kain Yomeru Hamoshlim Bo Cheshbon. Says the controllers, the ones who control, will say, "Let us come and make a calculation. Tiboneh v'sikonein irsichon. It shall be built and it shall be stabilized. It shall be made permanent. The city of Sichon." The context of this is Chazal say it's referring to Bilam, and Bilam was saying this, in recounting the Metzias of Sichon taking over the city of Moab. However, Chazal have here a drasha, and Chazal say something very, very interesting, perhaps famous. Maybe some of us know, some of us don't. They say the following: They say, "Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ma'aser Siv Alkein Yomram Moshavim V'Gomer." What is it? What does this pasuk mean? And it says that the Moshavim should say. So the Gemara says, "Hamoshavim Elu Hamoshavim Beyitzram." This refers to people who control their yetzer, their desire. Simply speaking, the yetzer hara. And what do they say? Bo cheshbon. Let us come and make calculation. So, bo unechashe, let us come and calculate. Cheshbono shel olam. The calculation of the world. What is the calculation of the world? Hefsid mitzvah, the loss that one undergoes by performing a mitzvah, keneged schara. You calculate that, you measure that, you weigh that in contrast to the reward that one gets from doing a mitzvah, uschar aveira, and the reward that one gets from doing an aveira, keneged, in contrast to hefseda, its loss, meaning the loss that one incurs when doing an aveira. Tibana v'sikonein imata osakein. This is the continuance of the drasha of the pasuk. Right, it says here Tibana v'sikonein. So the darshan in this first part to be referring to someone who is controlling his yetzer hara by making a calculation of hefsed mitzvah keneged schar or schar vera keneged hefseda, and saying Tibana v'sikonein. That means that it should, if you do this, imata osakein. Tibane ba'olam hazeh, you will be built in this world, v'sikone olam haba, and you will be settled in, and you will be stabilized in the next world. Okay, so that's the Gemara. Now, we have a very similar, almost word for word, Mishnah Navos, of course, from Rabbi HaKadosh. Rabbi HaKadosh says, he says, you don't know the matan schar of mitzvahs. And then he says like this, the loss of a mitzvah opposite at schar, and the schar v'navira keneged hefseda. So, essentially what that means is that, let's just go very simple. We'll start off. Someone, let's say, has doing mitzvah of Gmel Chesed or Shabbos Aveda, and he was on his way to manage his business or make a business deal, and if he does this now, he'll lose out on the money he made from the business deal, etc., etc. There's anything that you can think of. And essentially, we're saying that a person should weigh that against the schar of the mitzvah. And the schar of it, can say this. So if you're going to have something very enticing, you should measure it against the loss. Now, many Mefarshim, and Rishonim as well, explain this Mishnah and the Mishnah in the Gemara in Basra which is the darsha of our pasuk in this week's parsha, they explain it as referring to the idea of olam haba, which means that, according to their understanding, what Chazal are saying is that a person should calculate the loss in the next world that he will have against the reward of an Avera, and therefore not do the Avera. And you should calculate the reward of the next world that he will have against the um, the thing that he's losing out when he's doing the mitzvah. So that's how he's trying to understand. And unfortunately, I'm not zochet to really understand, what they mean by this, because I have many, many problems with that mahalach, and I'll go through some of them, and then I'll present my own understanding, and Hashem. So obviously, I think the biggest problem is the fact that it's a completely it's really not a mechudesh, not a chiddush. The Chazal not saying anything mechudesh. What Chazal is saying is like this: you have an avera, you're enticed to do it, believe in reward and punishment, and therefore don't do it, because haba, you're gonna go to hell if you do the wrong thing, and if you don't do the right thing, you're not gonna get reward. So weigh that against that in this world. So essentially, it's saying believe in schar nonish. That's not a chiddush that Chazal need to tell us. Believe in schar nonish. In other words, there's no cheshbin that saying, well, I'm going to lose out in the next world if I do this avera, or if I don't do this mitzvah, or if I do this mitzvah and I lose out here, I'll get in the next world. That's not a cheshbin. That's just you believe in the next world, and therefore the next world is more valuable than this world. So because you believe in it, so obviously that's what it is. Meaning, I don't see a chiddush of this dynamic according to that understanding. That's my first problem. My second problem is that, simply speaking, it's a device and it's a chazal which is, in that perspective, completely impractical. There's a very good reason that the idea of olam haba is never mentioned one time in the Chumash, the Torah B'Ksav. And that's because it's not essential to the etzem idea of keeping Torah, because keeping Torah is something that's meant to be done in this world, and for those who do it, they get good in this world, and like it says in all the brachas and the klavos throughout the Torah. It never mentions once olam haba in the Torah, and that's because, listen, the underlying idea is it is not realistic to tell a person, okay, I want you to calculate your next world's reward and don't do an avera because of that. The Gemara says about the next world, ayin le'ra'asa elokim z'losecha. Even the V'im, even the highest levels of prophets can never even begin to fathom the reward of the next world. So to tell someone, I want you to not do an avera in this world, and I want you to cheshbon that because you lose out on the reward of the next world, which is a reward that I can't even possibly begin to fathom what that reward is just it's impractical advice. Just impractical. It's not something that works. In other words, I understand, I'm going to lose out reward in the next world, but due to the reality of what I am, I have no way to appreciate what that reward is. So, meaning my question is not just it's impractical, it's impractical due to the very nature of the fact that we're human beings. And therefore, to me, that understanding is just, it's a very schwer thing that Chazal want you to do. In other words, let me just clarify. The idea that a human being in this world can't fathom the reward of olam haba is due to the nature of the being that he is as a physical person. So therefore, he can't fathom a reward outside of that. So to tell me to weigh, the reward of a physical deed against the reward of the next world and realize that I'll lose out in the next world, and therefore I should not do the wrong thing that I'm doing, it's a device which it's impossible for a person to really implement, because he doesn't have an understanding of the reward that he'll get in the next world. So Why, how could he calculate that? It just doesn't really make any sense to me. That's another problem. An additional issue is that Chazal say, and this is another Mishnah of us, it says that Shimon, he says you shouldn't be an Eved, a servant to Hashem, on condition to get reward. And the Rambam, everybody says it, doing mitzvos for reward, even that reward being Olam Haba, is a completely incorrect level of being, an incorrect reason to do things. Now, when Chazal tell you, be mechashiv, they're telling you, calculate this. Make this an active understanding in your mind. Say, I will not do this sin, because if so, I will lose out in the next world. I will do this mitzvah because my reward in the next world is so much greater. That means Chazal are telling you to do it for the next world. That's a stira minei to this other Mishnah in Avos, and to all of Gemaras throughout all of Shas. And it's a basic tenet of Judaism that you're never supposed to do mitzvahs or not do averos because of the next world. That's inherently selfish and it's not a relationship with God. That's just, I want the next world, and therefore I'm going to do the right thing. Okay, shkoyach. That's a very low level. That has no shaykhs to a real connection with the Rebbeinu Shalom, and therefore that understanding of this chazal just doesn't make sense to me. Another reason that this doesn't make sense to me, this understanding, is because if you look at the Gemara says like this: if it says imata osakin, if you do this, if you do this calculation, you will be tibane ba'olam hazeh v'sikonein le'olam haba. Now, in Hebrew words, in Hebrew grammar, literacy, the word tibana means you build it. The word tikonein means to solidify that building. So the binyan is the ikar, it's the main thing that's happening, and then the sikonein is the solidification, the stabilization of that initial binyan, which implies that Chazal are telling you that if you do this, you will be built in this world, and meaning that the main thing that will be accomplished in this world, and then in the next world that'll be stabilized. According to these Rishonim and these people's understanding of the Gemara and of this and of the Mishnah and Avos, Tibane Ba'olam Hazeh makes no sense, because the whole cheshbon is a question of, I have to regard Olam Haba. That's all that matters. My Olam Haba is all that matters. Therefore, I can't do this sin because I'm going to lose out in the next world. I can't not do this mitzvah because, what I lose here doing to this mitzvah is nothing compared to what I'll lose, to the reward I'll get in the next world. So what does it have to do with Ba'olam Hazeh? Why is it Tibane Ba'olam Hazeh if the entire cheshbon is revolving around your next world? It should say, Imata Isakain, Tekabel Harbe Schar Le'olam Haba. That's what it should say. But it's not saying that. And also, I don't really understand, according to them, the Gemara says, Hefsed mitzvah keneged sechar ra, the ma'apik hey. The ma'apik hey indicates that it's referring to the etzem hadav, the etzem schar of the etzem mitzvah. And we know that the idea of schar, simply speaking, is it's a reward that God gives you for doing the mitzvah. It's not the schar, it's not the etzem idea of the schar of what the mitzvah produces. That's another reason. And the last thing really is that, cheshbonai shel olam has very, very much implies this world. Cheshbonai shel olam, otherwise it's here cheshbonai shel olam haba. That's really what it is. And then the last thing over here, and this is not a kasha on their malach, this is a kasha in general. We know that famously Chazal say that a person should serve Hashem with all of his heart. So it says in Kriya Shema, Chalav Avicha. And Chazal tell us that, what does this mean? Chalav Avicha is B'shnei Yetzarecha, with both of your inclinations, B'yetzer Tov, with the positive inclination, or B'yetzer with the bad, with the evil inclination. So essentially, what this means is that Chazal are telling you that the idea of the relationship between the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, or the idea of the relationship between the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov and God, is not where the Yetzer Hara is stifled or destroyed. It's the idea that it's used, it itself is used to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because essentially we're saying, love God with both your Yetzer, with your Yetzer Hara as well. Which proves that you're not meant to stifle the Yetzer Hara. You're meant to use it as a way to love God. And therefore, the idea of being Moshel, as is very well known, the idea of being Moshel means to control, to dominate something. If you control something, you're trying to dominate it, you're trying to overtake it, that means that you're not allowing it to have self-expression. That's what that means. If someone tries to dominate somebody else, it's a suffocation of that self-expression. That's the curse that Hashem says, Velishech the chukas, says to Chava, you will have a desire for your husband, and he will control you, he will dominate you. That is the curse that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives to Chava, or he puts on Chava as a result of her deeds. So we know that Memshala, right? So Moshlim B'Yitzram means the act of domination, and the idea of dominating the Yitzr is brought up in brachos as well, etc. So it's a very challenging. In addition, Maharaj Shiva Shlita always said in this Gemara, the Gemara says that the Gemara in Kedushin, the Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Yetzer Hara, and he made the Torah for it as a tavlin. That's the lashon of the Gemara. And Rosh Hashiva Rabbi Yochanan's wife Shlita always said that what the Gemara means. Here you go, Kedushin Lamed. The Gemara says like this: Basar Torah Tavlin. The translation of the word Tavlin in Hebrew is a spice. A spice. That's what the word means in Hebrew. Tavlin is a spice. So Rashi Shita always used to say that Shadin being Isaac B'Torah is not that the Torah is the Sam. It's not that it's meant to kill the Yetzer Hara. It's supposed to be the spice. You know that spices, what they do is they bring out the taste of food. That's what the goal of a spice is. So Memela, the Shiva always used to say that the idea of being Isaac B'Torah is to bring out the Yetzer Hara in its appropriate context and situation, not meant to dominate and to completely sniff out and destroy the Yetzer Hara. So the we have a stira. We have one place that is Moishlim, which sounds like you should completely control and dominate evil inclination and give it no sense of self-expression. The other places, simply speaking, we have the idea that we have the Gemara or Mishnah over here, B'Shnei Yitzrecha, Yetzer Hara, which implies that you're not supposed to dominate it because you can't serve Hashem with it if it's gone. If you just dominate it, it no longer exists. And we have the Gemara in Kedushin, which, according to Maharaj Shiva Shlita, also is saying the same idea, that Torah is the spice of the Yetzer Hara. It's a spice for it, but it's not meant to dominate it. So, right at the end of the kashas, I like to say a concept which I think is a tremendous concept, and it's for those of us, this concept is maybe a complete dynamic change in terms of the way that we might view life based off our conditioning. And that is the following thing. When Chazal say that a person should be mechashiv hefsid mitzvah keneged schara, and schara v'er keneged hefsida. What Chazal is saying is the following thing. Rav Noach Weinberg Shlita always used to, one of the things he used to ask guys was, he used to ask them, do you eat to live, or do you live to eat? And everybody obviously always says that no one is going to tell you the Mali that they live to eat. In other words, the idea is that everyone has indulgences in their life, things that they like to do and have fun and acquire, etc. But nobody, even on the most basic level of sanity, will admit that his entire existence revolves around the point of indulgence in his life. No one's going to say, I live to eat. My entire existence is in order just to consume and eat and indulge. No one's going to say that. Which means that intuitively, we all have the understanding and the idea that our lives and ourselves are not our base indulgences. They're in fact the things that we do which constitute our identities, our goals and purpose in this world. That is the thing that we define ourselves by. And for the average person, it's true that he defines himself by his meaning and his purpose, meaning that he'll never admit that he lives to eat, never admit that he lives to go on vacation, never admit that he lives to have, whatever it is. So the thing is, that person will still fall and be controlled by his Yetzer Hara, because the reality is that he has not built an awareness of the fact that the only thing which is relevant to him is the reality of his identity and meaning. And let me explain this concept a little bit better. And the concept is that, unfortunately, for sure, in the West, and obviously, unfortunately, it permeates here as well in Israel, but people have come to define themselves by the reality of the extent that they consume and the extent that they make money and the extent that they have more, have fancier, have nicer. It's come to the point that the point in life where a person begins to feel self-expression is those things. And in that dynamic, the role that Judaism plays and that meaning plays is the role of a religious institution. In other words, there is me, and I'm my nice car, my fancy house, my beautiful wife, or my whatever it is. And then, there's also this religious thing where I go to shul and I, talk to my friends and I, maybe I learn some Torah. And essentially, the idea of a person's meaning and identity life structure is completely separate from the reality of how that person views himself in the deepest recesses of his mind. And that is a horrific and terrible state of being, which unfortunately probably most people are in. But in fact, Chazal are telling you here, at least the way that I'm looking at it, a brilliant and real, unbelievable concept. That is that the mitzvahs in the Torah and the averos in the Torah are 100% totally and completely the metrics by which a person can have a pleasurable and good life in this world or not. There is a implication, there is a consequence of mitzvos and averos of olam haba. but that is no shaykhs to the etzem performance and the etzem connection that a person has to mitzvahs. Rather, mitzvahs and averos, and doing those mitzvahs and those averos are 100% determining factors of whether a person will have a good life in this world or a bad life in this world. And that is for the simple fact, and this is very, very sharp. I want to understand this concept. It's for the simple fact that the reality of having a pleasurable life in this world is dependent upon a person existing and performing the things that align with the real understanding of what he is, with the real substructure of what he is. The Torah, we know, the Chazal tell us that the Torah is istakel b'reiso bari alma. Because Baruch Hu looked at the world and at the Torah, and through that he created the world, which means that the mitzvahs in the Torah and the averos in the Torah correspond to the reality of the most underlying truth of what a person is or is not. And when he does a mitzvah, he gains a sense of existence, and when he does an avera, he loses a sense of existence. And the truth of the matter is that the cheshbon that Chazal are asking you to take is one that is extremely intuitive and true. And that is like this. A person is, let's take a scenario. A person is on his way to a business meeting, okay, on his way to a job where he clocks in and he makes money by the hour. Now, there is, a yid and his car breaks down and you do a chesed for a yid. So now, the question is, what matters more? Does it matter more the money I'm going to make from the business deal or my job? Or what matters more is helping this yid? Helping the yid is an act of being yourself. The mitzvahs are you. A person readily admits that his life is not about what he gains, not about the money that he makes, not about, he doesn't live to eat, he doesn't live to collect money or to have nice things. That's not what his life is about. He'll admit that at any day. But he's not going to have that awareness at any given moment, and he'll say, "Oh, I can't help you, sorry, I have to go to work." When you do that, you're giving control to your Yetzer Hara, and you're giving it a place of self-expression. We're going to come to define what that means. But what Chazal are asking you to do is say, look, I know, and it is true, that my life in this world is the most pleasurable when I live in alignment with what I am. And therefore, I will gain more by doing this mitzvah of helping this yid than I will by consuming, meaning, or making, or collecting more money from my job or this business deal. Because the reality of the matter is, and this is true, and it stands the test of time, and all the manifestations in existence, that, and this is the reality, a person who lives according to a life of Torah mitzvahs on a genuine level is someone who is happy. Because the alignment of the inner and outer self, and it being true to the reality of what you actually are, the synchronization of those two things, meaning I am one thing and I am performing based off the expression of what I am, is what creates a sense of inner peace, which allows a person the stability and the sense of calmness and self-esteem that he needs in his life. The steer between those two things, those who party and those who are constantly going from one indulgence to another indulgence, everybody knows that that leads to a total breakdown of all life, and it's totally a totally a wrong and unsustainable way of living life. It's pasha. It's extremely pasha. And like I say, we all acknowledge that the reality of what we are is our meaning selves and not our indulgent selves. But every time we give into our Yetzer Hara, we are essentially allowing it to get further and further into our realm of self-expression. Now let's define what this idea of self-expression is. Oh, sorry, before we do that, this is now what Chazal mean, and this is a famous Chazal, and we all say it, but we have no idea what it means. And Chazal tell us that schar mitzvah, and the hefsed of an avera is an avera. And what that means is actually precisely what we're saying. That is that a schar of a mitzvah is the mitzvah. What that means like this. It's not referring to olam haba. It's referring to the reward of the mitzvah itself. In other words, when I do a mitzvah, the action of me having done that mitzvah is itself the reward, because it is rewarding on a short-term level and then on a long-term life organization level to do things that are the expression of the reality of what I am, because that is what allows me to achieve a sense of happiness. The fact that I am poyel, that I do according to the reality of what I truly am, that gives me the inner satisfaction that is pleasurable and necessary to have in this life. So the mitzvahs, and the same thing with Averas. The destruction of the Avera is the Avera itself. The sense of self-contradiction and depression and complete lack of synchronization of who a person is that comes from the reality of doing a sin is already a punishment. It is the punishment. God does us a favor by punishing us externally as well. And most of the times, the punishment actually doesn't come externally. It actually comes as a consequence of the fact of what we have become because of the actions that we did. And I think any of us who know, any, life stories know that this is true. A person does a negative thing that makes him a certain way, gets him involved with certain people, and then it goes downwards from there. It's an inherent consequence of what he did. It's not, God punishing you for the act that you did. Even that is true. And therefore, the concept of the mitzvahs and averas for any of us, if mitzvahs and averas for any of us are ideas that are esoteric and have to do with the next world, we have no shaykhs to what Judaism is b'chlal. And that's a very, very important thing to understand. And what Chazal are basically telling us is like this. They're saying, make this cheshbon. What are they saying, make this cheshbon? They're saying that you know that you define yourself by your meaning, by your altruistic existential self. You know that. Because you're always going to admit that your entire life is about the contributions that you're going to have to humanity and what you're going to give to your children and your family. You're never going to say, my whole life is about sitting and eating good steaks. No normal person will say that. So once you know that, don't let that fester on the intuitive level, the subconscious level. Take that reality to the conscious part of what you are, and calculate that each time. Okay, so now I want to do this Avera. So now make calculation. Oh, I want to do this Avera, but isn't it true that my entire life is about my sense of meaning and purpose? Would doing this Avera would that not destroy that and have a detrimental effect upon that? Well, if that's what I am, then of course I'm not going to do this Avera because that would destroy me. I'm not going to do something that's going to destroy myself. I just have to be aware at the moment that the sense of self, of purpose and meaning, is what I am. And that's what Chazal are telling you. Now, the brilliance of what Chazal are saying is that if a person makes this calculation over and over and over again, so he comes to a place and he says, no, I'm not going to do this wrong thing because that will destroy what I am, because what I am is my sense of meaning and identity. And he does that once, he does it twice, he does it 3 times. He gets to the point that in the deepest recesses and in the most conscious and real, way, his whole definition of self changes completely to his meaning and identity structure self. What he is existentially will be everything to him if he undergoes this process of calculation again and again and again. And therefore, what's going to result from that is that he will have domination over the Yetzer Hara. Now, let's explain what that means. The domination of the Yetzer Hara means that essentially we said that the definition of domination is stifling out the self-expression of something and rather it being that you completely control and dominate the thing. So something that you control, you are stifling its self-expression, right? That's obvious. That's why we try to control our kids, we try to control our wives, we try to control anything really we try to control in our lives. If those things have senses of self, they will immediately push back against us. And therefore, that being the case, the aside over here is the concept that a person is Moshe on his Yetzer means that the sense of a person's understanding and a person's desire of negative, of indulgence, what the Chazal is saying is that can't have a role of self-expression. Not only can't it have a role of self-expression in terms of should and shouldn't, it's not even feasibly possible. Meaning, a person can come to the point that he defines himself by his indulgences, but that will lead to a total breakdown of who he is. As we all know, that that's how it works. If a person is just a party, rat, they just constantly partying and partying and partying, and their entire sense of self only comes out when they're indulging. Everybody knows that leads to a total breakdown of self. So, in reality, there's no such thing as a self in Yetzer Hara. And in this process, what it does is it says, it's not my self-expression that I eat or have relations or, any of these things. It is something that is part of who I am, which I will express in specific areas, but it won't become self-expression, because self-expression means that this thing, which is my self-expression, is the entire way that I define myself. In order for a person to have self-expression within something, it has to be that he defines that thing as the entirety of what he is. That's what it has to be. And therefore, Chazal is saying, Enechanami, you do have to dominate your Yetzer Hara, meaning that you cannot allow the Yetzer Hara to encroach upon the realm of self-expression. It can't be that I feel self-expressed on an existential level when I'm eating a piece of cake. It's not possible. That is a place that is very, very wrong. Now, the idea of the B'chol of Avcha is the idea over here that I'll say that the way that Rashi says that the way that you know that you get the Chol of Avcha is these two bases, and that idea is like this: is that once a person is a Moshel, once his entire sense of self-expression is based in his Yetzer Tov, in his understanding of the meaning in his life and what he's contributing to those around him, then he uses the Yetzer Hara and he allows the Yetzer Hara, quote unquote, expression in the locations that are appropriate. When it's a mitzvah or when it's okay. What that does is it makes it that it's not the self-expression. It's not his self-expression in the Torah. It's that he expresses and he indulges the Yetzer Hara part of who he is in a time when it serves a greater purpose. And when he does that, he will not experience a contradiction of self between his indulgent desire of self and his Yetzer Hara self, Yetzer Tov self, and then his heart will be complete. And that is what it means, in other words, he will be in a complete state of inner peace between the two senses of what he is, and then he will love Hashem with that heart. That is what it's telling you to do. In other words, a person can't love God with just his Yetzer Tov. So, B'yetzim, that is what we're saying. That's the taich over here. Kafi, anias, heavily anias, very, very anias daiti. And I think that it's a tremendously brilliant, the Chazal, that it's telling you that it's not pshat. Don't relate the Torah and mitzvos as some esoteric, high-level, next world thing that I'm doing that has no connection to the reality of what I am. That's not only is it false and wrong, it's a completely incorrect way to relate to who you are to Judaism. And then, I forgot. So now, this Mahalach answers as well why it's not a stira between this idea and the idea of not doing something for the sake of getting reward. Why is there not a stira? Because according to what we're saying, a person is not calculating olam haba at all. He's just calculating the reality of his self-expression. Is this what I am, or is it not? So if doing this avira is the absolute 100% contradiction to who I am, and it will destroy who I am, I'm not going to do it. So it's not. There's no shaykhs to reward or not reward. The reward is that you get to be who you are. That is the rule, and therefore there is no contradiction at all in Shabbos.